Welcome back to DWeb Decoded, a podcast by Filecoin Foundation that explores the intersection of blockchain and the data economy. I'm your host, Aaron Stanley, and today I'm joined by Paula Palermo, who's an architect, urban planner, and economist, and she's also a longtime friend of the Filecoin IPFS community. She's been involved in numerous initiatives on the sustainability front, which we'll be talking about here today. Paula, it's really great to have you on the show.
Hi, Aaron. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here with you on the Filecoin community today.
Amazing. So just to set the stage here, Paula and I first met at Web Summit 2022, I believe, in Lisbon, where you were actually working on a Filecoin Green related project. And then we actually serendipitously reconnected at the G20 Tech Sprint event late last year, I think December of last year, 24, which was hosted by the Bank for International Settlements and the Central Bank of Brazil. And Brazil was the chair of the G20 last year. So Paula was actually one of the winners of this competition. So it was really cool to reconnect with her and see a Filecoin IPFS community member, winning one of these competitions, or I think you were like honorable mention or but anyway, maybe Paula, why don't you start off telling us a bit about that experience, and then maybe we can do a bit more of a proper intro.
Sure. So it was great actually to connect with you in this both two moments of my life, because when we met at Web Summit, I was working for Techstars in their Web3 program. So actually an accelerator program focusing on Web3 solutions. And then we were there with a company that were providing barter on chain. And this was nice, but not related to IPFS directly. And at the same time, I was building my own project that by the time was called Symbiotica, which was an index and also an impact assessment of cryptocurrency itself, and also how to rate cryptocurrencies. And we used to use IPFS as infrastructure as well. So this is some of the projects actually that I've been working on and using IPFS. Also other projects such as Gaia that we were tokenizing recycle e-waste certificates. And actually this was the first approach with Filecoin Green folks that we can talk a bit later. And also right now with Clara, which is the project that we met there at G20 Tech Sprint, and we got an honorary mention for the finals. In the main prize that we're competing was for ESG data. And we presented a tokenized green bond that actually used all the environmental data and social data as part of the bond metadata, but using IPFS as well. So this is part of my journey. As you said, I'm an architect, urban planner, and economist. Since 2018, I started looking for the cryptocurrency market as a solution for funding what we could not fund with traditional financial instruments. I started this looking for affordable housing and also other climate projects, because these are projects actually that need financial resources but actually cannot access to traditional financial markets, right? So there I first got in contact with Bitcoin and also peer-to-peer lending and said, okay, maybe we have some alternative here. And since then, I started to work and develop a project that actually have a real impact to the world, but also use all the benefits of the decentralized economy and finance, and also the technical benefits actually that we have for tokens and cryptocurrencies right now, which for me, IPFS and Filecoin are one of the main instruments for this market and actually for bringing information on chain.
Very cool. Very cool. Maybe talk a bit about more before I want to talk about Clara specifically, this project that you're building out right now, but maybe talk a bit about your journey into like IPFS Filecoin world. I know you've been involved with the Filecoin Green folks for quite some time, but maybe talk a bit about how did you come across this world? What has been your involvement over the years? I know I think folks might recognize you. You've spoken at a few of the sustainable blockchain summits that the Protocol Labs teams used to throw a couple years ago. So you're probably recognized by some folks here, but maybe talk about what your involvement has been just over the years.
Yeah, sure. So my involvement is very related with IPFS and Filecoin and Filecoin Green, which used it to be this grant program for the Filecoin ecosystem, 1 million to actually develop projects that were using the infrastructure of IPFS, impact projects, right, green projects. And that's how I met Alan and Caitlin, that right now they just started their own project, which is Devonian and Shirty, that we can talk a little bit more, which is super exciting as well inside the Filecoin and IPFS ecosystem. But back then they were running Filecoin, the grants, Filecoin Green grants. And at this time, with the previous company that I had, we actually had the thesis to first assess the impact of cryptocurrencies and understand the real impact of cryptocurrencies in the world. And second, to launch projects that were tokenized and causing a real world impact. So that's how we came with a grant proposal for Gaia Green Tech. Gaia Green Tech is a company that actually recycles electronic waste. And then our project with Filecoin Green was to tokenize the certificates, the recycling certificates. And we were acting in Brazil, which has a very specific landscape for recycling certificates, and tokenizing it added a lot of benefits for the market. So first, that we could actually, through IPFS, bring all the information about the origination of the batches of recycled e-waste, also all the certifications needed for this market, and using, let's say, this light system that actually through CIDs, we could access all the documentation that were required for this market. And then also the other benefit was promoting that retail people and actually other types of investors could have access to buy the certificates that create actually a market demand for companies that actually needs to comply with the regulations, and they need the certificates for compliance laws. So that was the initial idea of Gaia, and how actually we got this first grant from Filecoin Green. And then from there, we started. I always had like IPFS and Filecoin as being one of my favorite projects, and even like the cryptocurrency that actually has a real project behind and a real infrastructure, which I love. So after that, Clara is just another example of how we can use IPFS and also CIDs to actually bring information of the real world, what is really happening, to projects that need that proof, right? So we are talking about green and environmental projects that needs to be funded. But the thing is that this project normally lacks of fund because there is no trust. So we need actually to bring this layer of information that it's also very hard to actually bring this information because it's heavy, a lot of documentation. And Filecoin and IPFS actually bring a very smart and light solution to how to aggregate all this documentation to digital assets or tokens, if we want to say.
Oh, super interesting. And yeah, I want to dive into this a bit more. But first, maybe let's talk a bit more generally about the Clara project, and maybe talk a bit about just kind of, what the problem statement is. And I'd be interested in knowing just like, how does this fit in with the G20 agenda? Obviously that you submitted this to a G20 hackathon and you were one of the winners, but like what did they find particularly exciting about this perhaps? Maybe we can talk a bit about some of the other kind of components of the project as well, but maybe start off kind of from the high level, like what's the problem statement and what was sort of the connection to the G20 agenda here?
Sure. So, Clara, we presented the solution for a problem statement that was talking about ESG data and also how you can trust in ESG data. So we developed this prototype for green bonds, and using the Brazilian national sovereign bonds that are sustainable. So Brazilian has a framework right now for sovereign bonds, so sustainable sovereign bonds. And then we created the proposal of how to structure these bonds in a digital way, such as they are a digital asset, but also in a way that actually all the impact information of the bonds that receive the allocation of this money actually are performing, right? So creating even a rating system to access how these impact projects are performing in types of the impact that they promise, right? Because bonds, they are a type of debt instruments that actually say, okay, let's capture all this money right right now, and then we apply this to green projects that will have an impact in the future, and then investors will have the return. But the main idea is that for green bonds, the return itself, it's not just the financial return of the bond, but also the impact return, because the impact that this bond is causing is directly related to actually the performance of this bond. So we actually won with this proposal last year. Salute. We won with this proposal last year, second and third place at the Brazilian National Treasury Hackathon, that actually was asking for solutions for two main problems. One is for infrastructure for tokenized assets, and the other one for methodologies. And then we got second and third place with the very similar proposal that we got to G20. And for Tax Sprint, I think this was a very good way to bring this project for a very important context. So Brazil was hosting G20 this year. And at the same time, it is very important to highlight how are the efforts from the Brazilian Central Bank and the Brazilian SEC to actually bring tokenization to the market in a regulatory aspect, right? So we have a lot of advancement as a country, because first we are developing our own national currency, which is actually getting a lot of support from the government, which we don't see in other places of the world, right? Which actually can unlock a lot of the potential of cryptocurrency and digital assets nationally, and mainly for these type of projects that they have a very high regulatory need, because we're talking about green transition, right? So companies that need to comply, that need to invest into green solutions, they need to be part of this, let's say, regulatory environment. So Brazil has this position that is both being favorable for crypto assets and also developing a lot of innovation in terms of environmental assets, because that's also very important for us Brazilians, but also for the world, because we hold a lot of the forests that are still standing and are fundamental for the world. So in the context of the G20 Tax Sprint, again, we focus in on digitizing the Brazilian framework for sovereign bonds, green sovereign bonds, and we actually use it a way to add all the impact information of the allocation of the money of these bonds into the token itself. So investors, they can actually, when they buy this bond, they already have a semi-compliant asset. And we do that by adding all the information that is being required from the sovereign framework. So they have a lot of points that are being required: reforestation area, carbon credits or carbon being captured, right? So all this information is being added, but also we add the compliance with international sustainability standards, such as the IFRS S1 and S2, which were adopted by our Brazilian SEC, CVM, as voluntary for this year and for 2026 to be mandatory. So investors, they need to disclose their financial portfolio regarding sustainability. And this framework was also attached to this digital bond. So when you buy this asset, actually, you have part of the compliance of your portfolio done. And we do all this using CIDs, which are the roots for the documentation that is needed for compliance as well.
So this framework is similar to what we've seen rolled out in the US and in Europe, correct? Where companies are either they're required or they're at least strongly encouraged, I guess, depending on the jurisdiction, to disclose these environmental assets that they're holding on their balance sheets. And then that creates, it kind of creates like a built-in market of buyers, right? Of people who would want to hold these assets, right? Because I think that's kind of the other problem with some of these things is like, well, we have the supply, we have people that are coming with interesting ideas, but who would actually want to like buy these things, right? Or why would somebody want to hold this asset that comes with this kind of new technology that we don't really understand? But if there's a way that you can, transparently prove that, hey, this bond, this asset has the environmental impacts built into it that are required, and it's being issued and sort of traded and operative inside of a regulatory framework that's been sanctioned, then this becomes like the risk of holding or buying one of these things dramatically reduces, right? maybe talk a bit about like like so like maybe like the chain of custody of like how you're actually sourcing the data, like this data that's being ultimately put on chain and then put into the asset itself. And maybe talk a bit about, without maybe going super technical, but maybe just talk a bit about like how does that whole chain of custody work, where like if I'm an investor, or if I'm, you know, if I'm a company, or if I'm whoever holding this asset, how can I attest that this these impacts and this metadata that's inside these assets are verifiable, and I can kind of transparently see like where is this coming from.
That's a very good question, and that's a secret sauce of our solution because
okay, well, you don't have to really any trade secrets, but
no, it's not
we'd love to talk through that.
because we are in blockchain, so it's also we share what we are doing because it's important to develop the whole ecosystem. So this is not trade system; we are developing this with a community, right? So this, I mean, the secret sauce is that we are working with Landprint. Landprint is a company based in Brazil, US, and Italy, and what they do is that they provide since many years environmental data. So what they actually can do, and their platform was key to integrate to our bond framework, is that they can access the environmental data from satellites and for other sources. They also have their own methodology specifically to access the potential of land and land regeneration projects, which was one of the main topics that we developed for our MVP. So the Brazilian sovereign bonds, they have 10 types of different projects that they could have money allocated from the bond. So we are talking about renewable energy, we are talking about green transportation, we are talking about recycling, but there is one specifically about land regeneration and land management. And this is the one that we developed with Landprint. So they already have indicators that comes from public satellite sources. So this information actually is public information. And that's the good part of it, because there is a facilitation of this public available data to the asset itself. So actually you can see what is happening from a public source, which is first of all very good. And there is another aspect that beyond, let's say, these indicators that can come from public sources, which is already good actually to understand where the data is coming from, because everyone is receiving this data. These projects that receive these allocations, they also need to do periodic assessments from auditors. So normally they need to comply their information and they need to disclose their information about their projects and how this impact is happening. And then by actually adding these certificates, auditing certificates, we bring this on chain, and this information cannot be changed, which is one of the main pain points of green projects right now, because you can say, okay, I caused this impact, I related or I reported this specific impact, but actually this information can or be changed or be forgotten, or I mean, this information can be very volatile if it's not on chain. So I think one of the main elements is actually how we work with blockchain for the data infrastructure of these assets, not the asset tokenization itself alone, but actually to actually manage to understand where the data is coming from, and also how this information is attached to the assets. So also the project that Alan Ransell and Caitlin Moore are working right now, our colleagues from Filecoin Green, is called Cherty, and they actually can provide data stamps. So through IPFS as well, we can see where the data is coming from, what is the data source, and you can access this information. And this is definitely a next step for this project, because we want to integrate this infrastructure as well, which is just adding more verifiability using IPFS, but to the whole ecosystem, data ecosystem that we have related to these environmental assets.
And then maybe talk a bit more about why IPFS is such a critical component to making this work. I mean, I think this is a really cool use case, right? And I'd like to maybe, I mean, this is a Filecoin podcast also, but like we'll talk about we could talk about IPFS also. But like why is IPFS like really a critical component to making this type of use case really practical? And like, is there any other alternative tech out there that you could use that would work as well as IPFS in this case to achieve these objectives?
Yes, sure. So I think we can start by the point that almost, if not almost all crypto projects are using IPFS for data storage, which I
Right.
think is one of the points that makes this one of my favorite crypto infrastructures out there. And they are using this. Why? Because through CIDs, actually, this is a very light way to add information to a token or a digital asset or on blockchain, right? So this information cannot be changed. But how if I want to add a bunch of documentation to a digital format? This is very complex, but I think through CIDs, this makes it very easier and light, right? So this is possible to actually have a digital asset that have this information attached. And this is crucial for environmental projects. Why? Because we are talking about a long list of compliance documents. We are talking about satellite data. We are talking about a lot of things that you don't necessarily need to bring this to the network, but you can bring a route to it or where you can find it, right? So this is one thing that makes it very easy to build infrastructure using IPFS specifically. So for environmental projects, it's crucial because, you can trust me that the list of documentation that is being required, it's so long. And this is also the benefit of tokenizing things as well, right? How we can bring all this documentation as part of the receipt of what we are buying, which is crucial for any type of impact project.
Very cool. And maybe talk a bit more about how you see this project maybe fitting into the broader context of just refi. I mean, this is a word that's, kind of a concept that's been floating around for a while and with various momentum streams, I guess. But maybe talk a bit about how like this fits into this broader kind of refi picture. And I think what I find particularly interesting about projects like this is to your point earlier, where this is becoming a compliance requirement for companies that they have to hold these types of assets on their balance sheets, that they're being required to disclose and report these assets. And there's not like a lot of great ways. It doesn't seem to really accurately assess like, okay, we hold this asset, like what is our actual what is the actual carbon impact of the footprint or the environmental impact of these assets that we're holding on our balance sheet. And this provides a way of really of just generating much more kind of clarity and transparency around that whole process. And so I think the fact that you have kind of a built-in buyer who's looking for compliant solutions on this front is really interesting. And it seems like a very good, like kind of an ideal use case almost. So maybe talk a bit about like, how do you see adoption of this? I mean, I realize like Clara is just sort of just a project at this point. It's not like you're not like a company. You're not necessarily, going to market with this necessarily, but like this is just this is an idea that you're building out. But maybe talk a bit about how do you see adoption of this ultimately occurring here in the coming years.
Sure. And was great that you brought the word refi to the table because I think that is very, very important for at least my trajectory and for all the people and projects that were putting efforts to try to merge environmental solutions with blockchain, which is something blockchain and crypto, right? But it's something that was very exciting, let's say 3 years ago, 4 years ago, because the use case, it's so clear. We have crypto, we have blockchain that actually bring transparency to projects that need funding. We also have a lot of funding because the whole crypto market cap is gigantic. And we are funding projects actually that sometimes they have nothing behind. We can see all that is happening with meme coins, right? Not that, okay, Paula, it's against meme coins, but what if we could have like all these funds coming to real projects? I mean, that was the refi dream. And that was what actually happened with a lot of companies that started to try to tokenize carbon credits, to create infrastructure for environmental digital assets back in the day, right? And that actually did not come to market. So I also always have conversation with my friends and colleagues from the sector that, 3-4 years ago, we were drinking, we were at the parties at DevCon drinking champagne and was, okay, this is a market that will happen. And right now, almost everyone dropped. and there are no like the companies from that started the refi movement. It's not really like there because the market is still developing. And there is a topic. I mean, the two main points is that there is one very hard match with the crypto community and the environmental community, but more like behavioral wise, because there is a lot of expectations of return, from crypto markets. And maybe we're talking about environmental projects that actually have other types of offers. So not mainly returns. We are talking about different timelines. There's not a short timeline to fund an environmental related project, right? So there is this match of, let's say, behavior aspects, which I think was one of the reasons why refi took a bit to go. But we always still believe that like matching blockchain, crypto, and sustainability is something that will come. And what I personally think is that the compliance market they are key for that, because okay, we saw that companies were tokenizing carbon credits and they had no market to sell. Like we see right now, the main carbon credits protocol, they have $1 million in market cap, which is like, it's nothing. And we say, okay, this didn't happen because for voluntary markets, maybe people that does money with crypto or invest in cryptocurrencies, they are expecting other things that voluntary carbon credit cannot bring, right? So I think this was the main thing. But then when we are talking about compliance markets, and I think from where refi started to where we are right now with, ETFs coming, institutional investors coming, we see the national agendas actually bringing crypto to serious regulation in a positive way, such as Brazil. We are seeing that also there is a big amount of money that is the money that needs to invest in this type of project. So we're not talking more about the crypto individual investors that want alpha, like tomorrow. We are talking about big institutional investors that they need to invest in these projects, first because they have commitments to do so, and second because we are seeing a new era of regulatory compliance with sustainability that companies and governments and institutional investors, they actually need to have these assets in their portfolio. And third, because someone needs to fund that, right? Otherwise, I think as society, as humanity, we're done if we do not find ways to actually fund this project. So I see the compliance mechanisms that are coming being super interesting to actually drive investments to this market. And the good thing is that the innovation that we can bring with crypto infrastructure, with how we actually add the data for these projects, together with this tokenized asset, is something that is a really, really interesting and a big promise for actually markets that has a lot of money to be applied to these projects, because we are talking about big money, we are talking about big investors, we are talking about a real change that is actually what is needed to fund what matters in terms of environmental projects, green projects, and social projects. So we cannot rely only on the volatile crypto market, but we are seeing also a market that is coming with big players coming in with real money, but that can also benefit, and they will benefit of tokenized assets and all the benefits that it comes, right, regarding the data that is available and the magic that we can attach this data into the asset itself using, for example, IPFS.
That's great. That's super cool to see how Filecoin IPFS the tech stack is like the foundation of all this, right? That's super inspiring. That's super interesting, and hopefully other builders will have that same inspiration and keep doing what you're doing and or following in your footsteps, essentially. So Paula, really appreciate you coming on the show here. I wanted to turn it back to you for any like final thoughts. Like, is there anything folks from our ecosystem can do to maybe support you or get in touch with you if they want to help out in some way? And how can they find you if they do want to get in touch?
Sure, and thanks again for inviting me. I think was a great moment that we met again, because even that, okay, refi is not a thing anymore. Maybe we lost some expectations in terms of how environmental markets can become tokenized. I'm still a believer, and I see there are a lot of believers because there are other projects, going on and happening. And I see that every time more that we see on the news, the exciting news of the market, new bull market coming. We are here and surfing this wave. I think these are the exactly good time to keep building, and we need to keep building because I think this change depends on us and on this creativity and the innovation that only the blockchain community can bring. So you can reach out to me, I think mainly through LinkedIn. I'll be always available, to chat about your project. I've been diving into different projects and in this relationship of blockchain, crypto, and green markets for a while. I'm happy to help you anything that you're building. And also, if you want to help us to build Clara, just come in. As Aaron said, we won some prizes and we're trying to bring this to market, but there is a lot of things actually to be developed. So please reach out if you think this is something that interests you. And you can also reach out for a virtual coffee to talk about exciting things on crypto markets and also sustainability related projects, which are two of my main passions.
Amazing. Well, Paula, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you coming on the show, and keep up the inspiring work. It's really, really great to reconnect and hear more about what you've been working on. So keep it up, and best of luck. And thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time on DWeb Decoded.
Thank you.